Hey Sergio, how you doing?
I'm well, Guy. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good, thank you. It's a Friday. Sun is shining, which is a good thing being here in the UK, as we all know, and I'm pleased spring is well on its way. And we have six of your wines from one of London's urban wineries. And I was hoping that to start, you could fill myself in and everybody else on your background in wine and where the idea came to start your own urban winery.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, thanks for getting me on, and we love to tell people how we get started and sort of wave the flag for English wine for sure. So it's always a pleasure. I think from the start, I was never a wine person per se. Like I didn't come from a winemaking family. I'm American. And growing up in the Northeast, which is not necessarily known for wine production. So what I did have though was a family culture of making wine and making their own tomato sauce and growing their own veg, and so very much a agricultural family background. So I kind of grew up with home food production and winemaking sort of in the background. So it's kind of always on the sort of back end and around me. And so growing up, I've tried wine and tasted it, but I never really had a palate for it. Growing up as an American, it was more about the craft beer era. So I was very much into craft beer growing up and working in restaurants and in the back end of things. So, but right before I came over here, I was working for a high-end Spanish wine bar. And that's really sort of where I gained a lot more interest and fluidity, I guess, in wine knowledge. And I moved over here to be with my now wife in 2008, and got a job working at a one Michelin star restaurant called Maze, which is now sort of debunked to Lucky Cat. It's a Gordon Ramsay, or was a Gordon Ramsay restaurant, and really it's kind of at that point in the team who I worked with that I found wine to be really infectious and motivating, and sort of found the real sort of underlying passion. And that kind of set the seed and the premise of sort of moving on to sort of finding other avenues in wine, other means of sort of creating wine and other jobs outside of restaurant work. So that was kind of the real catalyst for me.
What did you pick up from being involved with the restaurant? Because obviously it's a very busy environment, lots going on, very, very manic. What part of the wine did you think, oh, that's something I want to get involved with?
Oh, I remember very, very specifically a bottle of wine that sort of completely changed my perception. And this is gonna, I'm gonna preface this with saying that I'm not a Bordeaux fan personally,
Okay.
but it was a bottle of 69 Petrus that a customer had spent some ridiculous amount of money on. And before wine goes to tables in sort of fine dining restaurants, typically as soms we check it to make sure that it's not faulty or oxidized or whatever it may be. And trying this wine was just sort of mind-boggling to me, because it's such a, at the time, this was in 2009. It's you have a wine from late 60s effectively that is somewhere over 40 years old, but still tasting fresh as a daisy, and still has all these really intricate sort of developmental tertiary notes that I've never experienced before. And it's kind of at that point for me that I found that wine was not only this incredible sort of, indulgent beverage, but is also this ever-changing body, right? So it's the evolution of something that changes over time, and encapsulates a time and a place initially, but then that developmental aspect comes into play. And you just see these wines that are going through decades and decades of ageability, and albeit not all of them. So that really piqued my interest. And I've always sort of geeked out to science when I was younger and through university. And so that sort of went, why does that wine do that? How can we make it? What are the parameters at which you need to have as a base to create something like that? So then that, you know, led to a rabbit hole of production and science, and going back to university and finding all I need to know or can learn about wine and wine production.
And starting your own urban winery. So that's the perfect place. Where would you like to start?
Yeah, the urban winery came much later, but yes. So let's start with the Sea of Love, our Pinot Blanc from 2020. So I believe, Guy, we're going to have everything from the 2020 vintage, which was pretty spectacular, but albeit very low yielding. So our business, Black Book, we don't own vineyards. We source grapes within 2 hours of our site in Battersea. Just, you know, we're located just over the Chelsea Bridge in South London, and in a little sort of humble railway arch. And so we really wanted to focus on 2 varietals, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, of which we have 4 of the 6 wines are those varieties, which we'll try, and different vintages, and the 2008. So I'll get to the 2018 vintage, but there's one wine that's not from the 2020 vintage. And as far as the Pinot Blanc was concerned, this is a part of our experimental range. And these are all grape varieties or techniques that we don't necessarily, apply to every wine. It's a means of us to push out the boat on certain things, use different varieties. And so we had the opportunity to buy grapes from a vineyard we were working with called Crouch Valley Vineyard, based in Essex, to buy a couple tons of Pinot Blanc to just kind of see what we can do with it. And I was really pleased when the fruit came in. It was really ripe. The acidity and the sort of flavor profile were in balance. And typically with what we do in the winery is using indigenous fermentation. So native yeast, native bacteria, all the wines go through full malolactic. It's really about developing texture and complexity within the wines themselves. And this in particular is 100% barrel fermented, no new oak. And it's a combination of some larger barrels, some smaller barrels, to kind of give you some different layers and sort of flavor profiles. Ultimately, for me, this wine really alludes to amazingly ripe stone fruit, and precisely, peach. There's a real sort of white peachy aspect to it for me, along with sort of this like lemony lime sherbet and sort of red grapefruit.
I think what was most appealing to me was how it didn't have a lot of the green apple and the very, very ripe citrus. It was softer, it was tamer, it was more along the lines of slightly warmer fruits. So there's a very balanced acidity there, great mouthfeel. But yeah, again, lots of fresh fruits, but really nice to not have so much of like the yellow citrus and a lot of this firm crisp acidity that we can get in the UK. This is more balanced and rounded. And it's very interesting having it as this particular grape variety, and you've gone down a specific route with it.
Yeah, I mean, effectively, what the whole thing for me and what we try to achieve at Black Book is the ability to create interesting wines that have depth and character and texture, and texture being the real underlining attribute for our wines. And hopefully, you'll see this stylistic thread as we go through each wine. It's really about telling the full story of the wine itself. And that sounds a bit cheesy as I said out loud. However, it's important because, to your point, English wine, we are, and let's not forget about Welsh wine as well. We have this real sort of backbone core acidity that runs through all the wines. Now, as a winemaker in a marginal climate, my job is to make sure that's in balance. And acidity is a really wonderful thing because it adds to preservation and structure in a wine. There's something that I think, if you speak to warm climate winemakers, acidity is something that they're always concerned about. And so they would jump head over heels to have our acids in their wines. However, that green appley aspect, which runs pretty rampant through most English wines as a result of malic acid, which is what you typically find in green apples. So hence why you have this sort of green appley flavor. And that's a result of those wines not going through malolactic fermentation, or they tend to sort of have partial and retain that. For us, it's really about developing those sort of more lactic flavors, the yogurts, the sort of butteriness, the richness of those wines to put things in balance. And I think you sort of really touched upon that quite perfectly.
But as you say, it is about balance. It really is key with honing down on the acidity, bringing out the fruit without it being too fresh, too punchy. This is a really great, simple wine. You know, very well defined. Love to have it with some food. Really, it's a real summer wine. That's what I like about it. I really like to be outside on a terrace drinking a cool, crisp English white wine. That's what jumps out to me. And it's great to see that you're exploring this grape variety, because there aren't a huge amount of English stills going down, or English winemakers going down this route with Pinot Blanc. That's a good job.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, you're right. Typically, I mean, if you think about champagne, they use Pinot Blanc as a blender, right? They're wearing the few permitted varietals. I think there's, was it 5 or 6 varieties permitted in champagne, and Pinot Blanc's one of them. So clearly, you know, and more notably in Alsace, Pinot Blanc's a big thing. So for us, again, I think there's a lot of potential for it on the right sites. Equally, if it's not ripe, it's not ripe, and it won't be pleasant. So we're just quite fortunate to have one that kind of ticks those boxes first time out.
Well, it certainly does. So I think to sum up, cool, crisp, fresh white wine, English white wine, drink it now, and yeah, enjoy, experiment with different food jobs. Okay, where would you like to go next?
Why don't we tap into the core, first of the core range, which is the Painter of Light Chardonnay 2020. So what's interesting about the Pinot Noir and Chardonnays is that when we first started in 2017, that's all I wanted to make was Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. I had zero desire to sort of deviate from those varieties. But since then, we've sort of had this play around. I'm very happy we did. And we have the segmentation. So we have the first one is a Pinot Blanc experimental range. Now we have what I refer to as a core range, which is made up of our Chardonnay and Pinot Noir and Pinot Noir Rosé. So those are wines we make every year. We try to refine them, make them better, try and make them a bit more serious, a bit more sort of complex, and really put energy towards that to making them sort of really stand out. And so we've had these wines from day one in 2017. They come from a grower called Clay Hill Vineyards, about half a mile away from Crouch Valley, planted in 2006 on what is in the name as south-facing clay soils. We create these wines from Burgundy clones. So to clarify, you with Chardonnay Pinot Noir, you have subdivisions of different clones from different regions. And these are, for me, I think, what's great about it is that it really expresses these sort of French clones in a way that I think Burgundy may have sort of had 40, 50 years ago before climate change. It's a means of getting phenolic ripeness and retaining acidity at the same time. So we very simply whole bunch press this. It goes straight to barrel without settling. So we don't sort of rack it to tank and drop out all the heavy sediments. We in fact encourage the gross lees, as it's said, to be in the barrel. And this wine gets to like 20 and 30% new oak. I think in 2020 is about 25%. We use entirely French Burgundy barrels, and we use 4 different coopers. So you kind of have this layering of texture and complexity that comes through. And unlike the Pinot Blanc, which gets about 6-7 months in bottle, in barrel, the Chardonnay gets up to about a year of aging. So this is part of our autumn release. So, I mean, what do you think? It's your first time out with it, so.
I was really impressed with how smooth it was. the acidity has been balanced really, really well. It's not too punchy but then it's still retaining a lot of definition, and it's a beautiful mouthfeel. You've still got lots of citrus, but again, they've been toned down, which is great because it's not too punchy, which is something I refer to a lot. Something I actually whilst I remember, I was hoping you could talk about your labels as well, because you've got all these great designs. So just
Totally.
fill us in on this bottle, and we'll also mention the other one as well.
Yeah, so Painter of Light, it's, I think when my wife and I, who's my business partner, we're completely independently owned and family owned, but when we started out, we wanted to really embrace the city. We're an urban winery. We're based in effectively central London. We're just over the bridge from Zone 1. And so we wanted to really highlight that in our branding and in our labels. And I think far too often, English producers and Welsh producers tend to sort of go for these safe bets of chateaus and rolling hills. And that's slowly changing, but that's not necessarily what we want to go after. And our wines and our wine labels are based around things you see every day in London. So for instance, we make a couple of different Chardonnays, and we sort of look at that, and we base those designs and names. All wines have names, as we'll find out, around art in London. So Painter of Light is named after Turner. That was his nickname. And the tiles from the Tate Britain are inspiration for the earrings on the Face of Londoners, which is what you have in your hands. It's part of that range. And so those half moon earrings can be seen and are inspired from the tiles of Tate Britain. And a really fun sort of fun fact with that, if we're doing a deep dive into this, is that the Tate Britain has the largest collection of Turner paintings, I believe, to date. And Henry Tate, who obviously is the founder of Tate Britain, was the first to display Turner's paintings back in the late 1800s out of the Royal Academy. So it kind of comes full circle, and all labels sort of take that into consideration. They have different inspirations and different themes behind them, but for the Chardonnays, that's really about visual arts, for instance.
So I want to make sure if I got this right. That is earrings, is that right? And then the lip. Yeah.
So it's just a contemporary face. It's kind of the beauty about it is we don't really have any descriptions about the labels on the website or on the bottle. So it's kind of what you want to make out of it, right? So it's like wine. Like, I'm not trying to tell people what they should taste. Equally, I'm not really saying what they should see in the label. So it's completely up for interpretation. And so, Sea of Love. So what you have in your hands.
I was just about to say,
we went into a slightly different direction with that. So the experimental range takes influence from London transport and music my wife and I like. So in a previous life, I worked very sort of low level in music for record labels, helping friends plan gigs, also working for independents. And so music plays a major part in my life. I love gigs, and my wife is the same way. So those names come from songs that we like or albums that we like, and different aspects of London transport. So there's no coincidence that you'll find a lot of inspiration comes from the Victoria line here in London, the tube. And so Stockwell Tube Station, which is what Sea of Love is based on, and is also coincidentally on the Victoria line, was our stop for a number of years when we lived in Stockwell. So we've sort of interpreted that and made it our own. And Sea of Love is actually a song by Cat Power, who is an incredible sort of singer-songwriter who we really enjoy. So we really want to, and the way that it's spray painted on the actual label is kind of indicative of a bit of graffiti as well, taking more of that urban environment.
There's definitely a strong connection between art and wine. It's something I've noticed with a lot of people and a lot of in the wine world, they always try and bring the two cultures of art and the culture of wine together. And as you say, you're doing it in your own way with the wine labels, which a lot of people do, and it's a great thing to have, and it's all part of your unique brand, which is great. So let's move on to your next one then.
Cool. Got Slow Disco. That is a song by St. Vincent, actually. And the label takes inspiration from an Art Deco sign for Victoria Station, train station from the 1920s. It's a Sauvignon Blanc. It comes from the same vineyards as the Pinot Blanc Sea of Love, but it's not a Sauvignon Blanc that you would typically associate to be Sauvignon Blanc like, if that makes sense. I've never really been a huge fan of Savvy, particularly from Marlborough. I think they tend to, I mean, they have a time and a place. And dare I say, when I worked in Maze and accompanying restaurants, Tin Pot Hut was the second cheapest bottle on the wine list, which went out and flew out like no tomorrow. And just kind of ruined Savvy Blanc for me. But I really enjoy barrel fermented Savvy and some skin contact. So I worked with, prior to Stamp Black Book, I traveled quite extensively, making wine for other people and sort of high ends Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, cool climate producers. And amongst them, I found one was this outfit in Martinborough, New Zealand called Atarangi. And they make some great Savvy Blancs, some of my favorite, in fact. And they really sort of use texture to pad it out. They do a bit of cold soak skin contact. They sort of ferment partially on skins and some bits. It all sort of varies from plot to plot, but there'll always be a certain percentage of fermented on skins. And I've sort of got this in. We only had about half a ton of it, so we only made one barrel of it as an experiment. And so we cold soaked the grapes for 7 days, and then fermented for about halfway on skins, and then we pressed it off and finished it off in barrel. So, you know, it really sort of emulates a bit of the skin contact or entry level skin contact wine without being too intrusive. So on the nose, which I found was incredibly interesting, you get these really sort of fun asparagus and green pea notes when you first open it up, and then as the air hits it, and I should probably sort of, you know, add that the wines all have ageability, but they all need decanting as well, I think. You know, the stuff stylistically how we make wine is for longer term aging, but it's also, if you are going to drink them slightly younger, they do need air. And this one is a good example of that. So as the air sort of binds up with the wine itself, you end up getting these amazing tropical fruits of dried pineapple and dried sort of citrus notes, a bit of ginger spice in the background. And it's not too jarring when you drink it for me. I think it's enough. It shows that there's a little bit of phenolic character, but it's not sort of drying or chewy by any means. And so I think that for me is really epitomizes how you can use phenolic character or cold soaking on skins for wines to build texture and complexity and development in it.
One of the surprising factors about this wine is the green fruit element, and also pea, as you said. I was really taken aback by that, because that's exactly it, which is not something.
It's like snow pea.
It's you know, and but it's a bit of the sweetness as well. So not as in a sweet wine, but that fresh fruit sweetness that you can get. Very crisp, again, like nice and soft, easy drinking, well balanced. I'd like to try this with some food again. It's always good to see how the balance is retained. A nice bit of acidity, but honed down, which is great, because it's much smoother, this wine, than the other two. It's been a very nice.
It's quite rounded. Yeah, it was his first year the grapes came off those vines, first year produced. So we were able to get them really, really ripe. And so as a result of the reduced yields on the vines, we were able to then focus on the berries or the bunches that were there, which you then get a softening of everything in terms of wine. So yeah,